Hello, welcome to this video where I'm going to show you how I made the spellbook. This is a Dungeons and Dragons spellbook where wizards have a book where they record all of the spells that they know and use it as an integral part of the game mechanic. So I just decided to make this prop to have it as an actually useful object where I can have all of the rules for the spells that my character is going to have. I wanted to make the text block from scratch, so I pulled out a bunch of pattern papers that were in the colors and themes that I thought would fit. I have this quite nice letter writing set that I also got as a present from a friend quite a number of years ago. And here I'm just measuring, trying to figure out how big I can make the book inside. So I pulled out one of those papers and making sure that I can make a text block that's going to fit nicely inside. And I'm just trimming and folding one by one all the papers that I'm going to be using. I think I had a total of 40 pages. And these are single-sided pattern papers, so the other side is completely blank. And I didn't want to have white at all. I wanted the whole book to have this weathered old paper aesthetic. So I'm making a very thin wash of color from some transparent brown and some yellow. And I'm taking my time to color the reverse of the pattern papers one by one on every page. And I really don't mind being sloppy and leaving paintbrush streaks. They're still going to get further treatment, and I just want to color the pages at this stage. And I really don't mind if the other side gets stained or it gets some splotches. It's just going to add to the overall aesthetic in the end. And this is like 8 hours later when all the papers have dried. And I actually like that the pages curled and they aren't perfect anymore. It's just going to add to that spellbook feel. I'm using a variety of inks from yellows to browns to oranges, and inking the edges and sometimes the whole page, just making a variation. They're all going to be held together by that underlying reddish brown color anyway, so it's all going to look nice together in the end. Some are lighter, some are darker, and the plan is to customize each page as the game progresses and I gather more spells to copy into the spellbook. So here are my pages. They're pretty much ready to be binded right now. So I'm just arranging them in the order that I would like to have them in the end, so that there are no duplicate pattern papers right one after the other. And now I'm measuring and I'm making marks, I believe, at every 3 centimeters for the holes, because I'm going to be using needle and thread to bind these pages together with something called cattle stitch. It's a bookbinding method that I learned from someone here on YouTube, and I'm going to leave a link to that video in the description. because I'm not going to be able to explain exactly how it goes or be able to show you, because this is just the second time I've ever tried bookbinding. So I just took some embroidery thread in a color that I liked and that would match the aesthetic of the book, this kind of reddish brown, and I waxed it so that it slides better. It just makes the fibers lay flatter and they don't catch so much on the paper. And here I am, a little bit clumsily, a little bit messily, but in the end effectively binding the pages together. Normally this would be done with signatures of several papers stacked together, but I'm doing the pages one by one because I want to have those pattern papers be double pages, so that I have a double page spread every other page. And when I'm done with the stitching, I am going to use some red silk ribbon. I want to have 2 different bookmarks, so that's what I'm trying to do here. Just cut them to length and melted the edges with the lighter to make sure that they don't fray. But before I can glue them down, I realized I need to do the inside covers, so I picked another pattern paper. This one is a lot more sturdy, and cutting them to size, folding them and gluing them to the end pages, as well as cutting a strip of leftover paper to glue to the spine over the ribbons to reinforce it. And I'm just using PVA glue, being careful. It's kind of hard to find the balance of being generous enough that it's effective, but also not over gluing, because I didn't want to risk the glue seeping in between the pages. And here I am adhering the inside cover as well as that paper strip to the spine that will reinforce it. Then of course using a heavy book until it dries. And then cutting the bookmarks to size and then melting those edges again. Now I'm back to working with the cover, and first of all I'm removing those pages and the envelopes and all the other elements that weren't necessary for my purpose. And as you can see, the text block that I made is going to fit quite nicely in the middle. I'm using some sandpaper on the outside because it was shiny, so that the glue will adhere a little bit better later. Using this quite nice chocolate brown to give everything a neutral base coat. For the cover of the text block, I'm going to use the specialty paper that I have that actually has adhesive backing, and I just cut it to size and carefully adhering it on, making sure that there are no wrinkles. It's not quite long enough to go all the way around, but it doesn't matter because the back of the book will actually be glued inside the trifold cover. And I'm just trimming the edges and neatening things up. And yeah, just checking that everything works and everything will be fine. So now I'm using some other kind of specialty paper. It's impossible to see on the video, but this actually has a very subtle texture of reptile skin, and I like the idea that this is not a leather bound book, but it's kind of like a lizard skin bound book. It's white, but when it will be painted, that texture is going to become more visible. And it also has this really nice feel to the touch, just like a very, very subtle crocodile skin purse, I suppose. And I'm using the same chocolate brown to give everything a base coat. And now I'm working on figuring out what is the arrangement of the design elements that I want on the front cover. And I just made a mock-up out of some scrap paper, and I had picked out some Google images, the silhouettes of the hands, and someone drew me these wonderful flames that I just manipulated a little bit in an image editing software, and I just made the shapes scalable to the size that I want, printed them out, and now just checking, making sure that my design is going to work. And I'm using some sturdy cardstock for the design elements, just gluing the paper to scraps of cardstock that I had lying around. The color doesn't matter, everything is going to get painted. I just like using up every bit that I have lying around. So the middle oval design element is actually going to have 3 layers. The hands are going to be sticking out, 3-dimensional, and as you can see, I cut out the flames, so that part is going to be recessed. And I'm just very carefully cutting and gluing everything down and layering until everything works the way it's supposed to. I took my time and cut out the corner elements very carefully as well. And these will also be layered, but only 2 layers, so that the actual flame part will be recessed. And just adjusting and making sure to make corrections. Like, none of the cutting is actually perfect, but I wasn't aiming for perfect alignment. I did want to have it this feel of handmade. Of course, gluing down and pressing them again with a handy dandy heavy book. Cutting them again, this time only along the outline, and getting these nice corner design elements as a result. I'm going to be gluing them with hot glue. Of course, PVA glue would work as well, but because they were so thick and dimensional, it was just easier to go for the hot glue. And I didn't mind the extra dimension. I always like 3D bits sticking out. And just sealing in the edges and also making it a lot more aesthetically pleasing, having a sort of border with the hot glue. For the big element in the middle, I did use a little bit of PVA glue just to make sure that the middle also is adhered down and that it won't be puffing up. Now I'm using these really cheap adhesive gemstones to make border around the oval. The color really didn't matter. Of course, I do like the red, but not this sort of shiny, cheapy looking red. I just needed the dimensional elements there. Now I'm turning my attention to the inside covers of the big cover and just taking more of these design papers that I used for the pages and cutting them to size and just sticking them on the inside covers to carry on with the theme and also to hide some of the leftover issues from ripping things out before. And I'm reusing some of those paper leftovers. I like repeating visual elements and themes, and just using PVA glue again for everything. Using the same chocolate brown to just absolutely cover everything as a base coat. And this is a very nice creamy acrylic paint that dries quite fast, so it's nice to work with. And now the thing that I was most nervous about is actually painting the flames, because I've never painted flames before successfully. I actually googled it and watched some other people do it, and actually found a very helpful instructional video here on YouTube, and I'm also leaving a link to that because an expert can explain it a lot better than I do. I'm just using a red, a couple of oranges, yellow, and white to go from darkest to lightest, and using this stippling motion with my brush to make, I don't know, to just make it look fiery, I suppose. Yes, I left the middle large flame to the end, so to make sure I had plenty of practice by then, and being a little bit more confident in painting that and adding the layers. Of course, where the fire is lighter is going to be the hottest, so I kept those to the denser regions. And I'm just using my finger to color the hands. I wanted them to be fairly subtle. I didn't want them to be a stark color, but I did want them to stand out from the background. And this is actually the color that I'm going to leave it with, as the uneven color coverage actually really appeals to me. Unfortunately, I forgot to turn my camera on for this part, but I did go ahead and paint the rest of the book with the same reds, oranges, and yellows as the flames. And I wanted to add this sort of rust effect to the book, and I'm using PVA glue and simple old construction sand to achieve this effect. Until it dries, it won't really look right, but I've done this before on other things, and I really like the end result. So I'm just stippling on some PVA glue in areas that I want to add sand, and just covering it in sand, and then shaking off the excess, and using a clean dry brush to clean up areas that sand may have got to that I didn't want. I'm very happy with how this came out in the end. It really did pay off, having to have that extra waiting time for the sand mixture to dry. Many hours later, I made this wash with red paint and shellac ink, and I'm going all over the sand areas and the non-sand areas, but going very carefully around the major design elements. This stains everything more red, but also seals in the sand, making sure that it will never move or shed, and it will be time resistant. It also makes things a little bit shiny, the shellac ink, but I really don't mind. As I mentioned, it has that subtle texture of lizard skin, so a little bit of shininess really doesn't hurt. And I'm also taking a little bit more of that brown, cleaning up the edges where I may have made mistakes, just to make sure that brown is really nice and matte. And finally, I'm taking a metallic copper color and going all over everything except my main design elements. Using my fingers and my brush, just a combination depending on what feels right. I'm basically going all over the outside of the cover. And here I am finally adding the text block to the main cover. And I used double-sided sticky tape for this for two reasons. Because that specialty paper was a little bit finicky and I didn't know if it would hold well with PVA glue. Also, using the sticky tape makes this not 100% permanent. So just in case I want to switch out the text block later on, then I can do that. And here I'm just giving you a look of what the book turned out to be like. And of course, the last step, because this requires like 12 hours of drying, I am filling in those recessed areas where I painted the flames with resin medium, and this will have a sort of shiny glassy effect when it dries. It looks milky, and when first applied it dries completely clear, and it has this very nice effect, and also seals in the paint job very well. So there it is, after about 12 hours of drying, I believe. I'm very happy with the results. I feel like my vision became real. It's always a really nice feeling to be able to birth into existence something that only existed as an idea in your head before. Special thanks for the lovely person who drew the flames for me. It was exactly the boost I needed. Thank you for watching my video, and I hope you have a nice day.